Ma... Ma... The sound was small, fragile, and almost impossible to hear, but it stopped Harry Rutherford cold in the doorway. His coat was still on, his briefcase hung from his hand. For a heartbeat, he couldn't even breathe. His twin sons, the children who had never spoken a word, never taken a step, were facing the maid. Jessica knelt on the hardwood floor, arms outstretched, yellow cleaning gloves still on. Her voice was low, steady, a lullaby Harry hadn't heard since his wife died. Mason's trembling hand reached toward her. Jaso's lips parted again, a second syllable breaking the house's long silence. Ma... Not a cry, not a reflex, a word. The boys were moving, stepping, reaching. Not for Harry, not for the therapists, for her, for the maid he barely knew. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. He had built this house to be silent, orderly, unbreakable, a fortress against grief. And yet, here in his own living room, the impossible was happening. His sons, once trapped in stillness, were calling someone Mama. Jessica didn't look back at him. She stayed still, whispering, coaxing, as if any sudden movement might shatter the moment. Harry tightened his grip on the briefcase, the leather creaking under his fingers. Everything he thought he knew about his children, about control, about what could or couldn't heal, was unraveling right there on the polished floor. And he hadn't even stepped inside the room yet. Harry didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat was too tight, his mind already pulling at the edges of disbelief. He stood just beyond the doorway, half in shadow, half in sunlight, the words Ma, Ma, still echoing like a hallucination in his ears. Mason had dropped gently to his knees now, not hurt, just exhausted. Jaso sat beside him, his tiny hand resting on Jessica's knee, like it had always known the way. The moment was already fading, retreating back into the quiet. But the damage was done. Something had cracked open, and once you've heard your child speak for the first time, even if it was barely a breath, you don't come back from that. Not the same man, not the same father. Harry stepped back before anyone saw him. The door clicked shut behind him, with the same soft finality as every day before. But now the silence wasn't comfortable. It wasn't armor, it was unfamiliar. He moved down the hallway, slow, measured. The mansion stretched around him like a well-pressed suit, tailored, expensive, suffocating. A grandfather clock ticked somewhere in the formal wing. No laughter, no crying, just the constant clinical rhythm of order. It had been this way for 2 years, ever since Caroline died. The boys had come early, complications, nerve damage, paralysis. No one ever used the word vegetative, but it hung in the room during every diagnosis, every late-night consultation, every white lab coat shrug. Harry had nodded, signed papers, paid bills with fingers that never trembled. He'd buried his wife and inherited a future made of quiet hospital corridors and hushed terms like non-verbal, non-ambulatory, unlikely. He was not cruel, he was not indifferent. But he had learned to stop hoping. Routine was safer, control was cleaner. The boys had a schedule, nurses, therapists, physicians, oxygen backups, and floor plans built for accessibility. There was no mess, no noise, no surprises. That had been the deal. Then, 3 weeks ago, Jessica Martins walked in. Hired through a referral, she came with strong references and a quiet manner. Early 30s, black. Wore her uniform with respect, didn't ask questions, cleaned thoroughly, kept to herself. She wasn't meant to matter. She was background. But the boys had started tracking her movement with their eyes, subtle at first, then longer, more deliberate. Their hands would twitch when she passed near. Their breathing would calm when she sang, softly under her breath, sometimes so faint that the baby monitor barely picked it up. The nurses said it was coincidence, maybe even confusion, just sensory stimulation. Harry believed them, until today. He reached his office and closed the door, resting his back against it. The silence inside felt different now, not like before. He could still hear it. Not the song, not the footsteps, just the sound of 2 boys, voices like wind through thin glass, reaching for something they'd never had the words to name. Ma! Not a miracle. Not quite. But something close enough to make a man like Harry Rutherford start to question everything he thought was possible, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to be alone with the answers. Harry didn't go back to work that afternoon. He didn't check his meetings, didn't call the estate manager, didn't respond to the nurse's briefing waiting on his tablet. He sat at his desk for nearly 20 minutes without moving, staring at a smudge on the glass. Ma. The syllable had been thin, barely formed. But it wasn't a fluke, not an echo or artifact of imagination. He had heard it, felt it, the weight of it still pressed against his chest. They had said it to her, not to the speech therapist who charged $3,000 an hour, not to the neurologist who gave him PowerPoints instead of answers, not to him. Jessica, the maid. He couldn't say her name without a strange twist in his throat now. Harry stood and crossed to the window. From his second-floor office he could just make out the edge of the east garden, the boys' play area such as it was, a sterile patch of grass lined with padded mats and foam equipment no one had ever used. Most days it looked like a forgotten showroom, a staged space for a family that didn't exist. Except today, someone had opened the windows. The curtains fluttered, the air smelled like fall, and Harry felt, for the first time in a long time, like he didn't recognize his own home. He left the office, walked the halls slowly, not toward the living room, but around it, through the gallery corridor, past the portrait of Caroline holding an empty basket in a field that had never really existed. He stopped in front of it, staring at the painted sky. He whispered to no one. "Did you see them?" The silence didn't answer. When he finally returned to the nursery, the twins were asleep. Jessica sat on the floor nearby, writing in a small cloth-bound notebook, her back straight, knees tucked beneath her. She didn't look up when he entered. Harry stood in the doorway longer than necessary. Then, too tightly, he said, "What were you doing?" Jessica closed the notebook calmly, placed it beside her and turned toward him. "Reading to them," she said. "That wasn't reading. They like the rhythm. It settles their breathing." Harry stepped inside. His voice didn't rise, but something sharp leaked through it. "They spoke." She nodded. "I know. You think that's normal." She tilted her head. "I don't think anything about them is normal. That's the point." He stared at her. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize. She just looked present, like this wasn't a crisis, but a continuation of something she had already known was possible. "They said, Mama," he muttered. "They don't know what that word means," she said gently. "Not yet. But they said it to you." Jessica's gaze didn't waver. "They said it to the one who's been holding them, feeding them, talking to them even when they couldn't answer." She wasn't gloating. Her tone wasn't defensive, just factual. "You were hired to clean," he said. Jessica gave a small nod. "That's what the contract says. Then stay in your lane." A silence stretched, not angry. "I'm not trying to replace anyone, Mr. Rutherford," she said quietly. "But they don't understand contracts or boundaries. They understand presence." Harry felt the heat rise in his neck, and he didn't know if it was shame or fury or something in between. He wanted to walk out, to end this conversation, to fire her maybe, reassert control. Instead, he asked, "What else have they done?" Jessica paused, choosing her words. "Small things. Jaso turns his head when he hears my voice. Mason's been trying to mimic shapes with his mouth. It's early, but it's real. And you didn't think I should know." Her eyes softened, but she didn't retreat. "I thought you wouldn't believe me." Harry turned toward the cribs. The boys were still, but their breathing was steady, deeper than usual, peaceful. He looked at Jessica again, and for the first time, he didn't see a maid. He saw the only person in the house who had spoken to the boys like they could hear her. And maybe because of that, they had. He left without another word. That night, Harry didn't work late. He didn't go back to the office. He sat in the downstairs hallway and listened as Jessica sang the boys to sleep. and somewhere between the third verse and the silence that followed, he realized he hadn't thought about Caroline in a way that hurt all over. Not once. Just long enough to wonder what tomorrow might sound like. Jessica never changed her rhythm, not after the boys spoke, not after Harry's questions, not even after the silence that had followed his quiet exit from the nursery that night. She kept folding laundry in perfect rectangles, humming softly as she worked,